our point of the partnership is that whatever government is doing, you want to make sure it's doing it right. And the fact of the matter is that if your employees are not fully engaged, if you are not giving them the support they need to actually do their jobs well, then everyone gets hurt. This is not about happy employees. You know, there's an interesting data point. The Office of Management and Budget, which is one of the central power agencies in government, about 5-6 years ago, was the #1 ranked agency overall, but it was the last ranked agency in work-life balance. They were working incredibly hard, and I guarantee you no Fridays off, and yet they were the most engaged, the most committed across the board. That's what you want. You want employees in the federal government that are being paid for by your taxes, by my taxes, to being engaged as possible so they can produce the most for us. Leave aside the other questions about what they should be doing. That's a political debate that is well worth having, but once something is decided that the government should be doing it, do it well. Part of doing it well is having an engaged workforce. That's not what we're getting today.
Should note that some agencies, after you released your rankings yesterday, were quick to tout where they were, if they were high up in the rankings. Here's a tweet from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. USPTO ranks #1 in best places to work in the federal government report, with a link to your website. That's ourpublicservice.org if you want to check out the Partnership for Public Services website. But we've got a few minutes left with Max Steyer, who's the CEO and president of that group. Jason is up next from Seattle, Washington, on our Independence line, and Jason's a federal employee. Jason, thanks for calling in.
Hey, good morning. And the first thing, I was struck by a 50% response rate, because I work for the Census Bureau on a survey that requires an over 90% response rate. And the irony of it is it's obligated by U.S. law that people respond, but when people don't respond, nothing happens to them, and I get docked for not getting the interview. And so, you know, I look around my colleagues at the Census Bureau and I realize that what they're really doing is they're pretty much asking us to work a full-time job for part-time pay. And if we actually report all of the time that we spend, both administratively and interviewing in the field, we're actually docked on hours per case. So on one side, we have a response rate grade where if we don't get somebody who refuses to do a survey required by law, we get docked. And then if we spend time trying to get these people to actually comply, our production rate is docked as well. And I just see this as a spinning towards the drain, and I wonder why the Census Bureau does this kind of thing.
Max Steyer.
Well, look, I think you give a wonderful example of inefficiency in your organization that one would hope in a healthy, vibrant organization that your voice would be heard by the leadership, and they'd be like, hey, he's right, why are we doing it this way? And they would hear you and they would make the changes that would enable you to do your job better, and at the end of the day, ensure that the American public is getting a higher rate of return for their tax dollars. So the environment we want to see in the government is one in which people on the front line are heard, the good ideas are actually acted upon, that people have the resources they need to do their job well. That's what this survey is intended to help measure and intended to help try to promote. You know, again, hopefully your statement here on this call may help, but I'm hoping that the Census Bureau and other organizations will start looking at the data and trying to determine whether people feel that they are actually being heard. One of the key questions on the survey is, do you think that the results of this survey will lead to change? And that's a pretty darn good metric about the health of the organizations and whether or not the leadership is actually listening to their people.
Rick S. writes in on our email asking the source of funding for the Partnership for Public Service.
We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. So as the CEO of this organization, as most CEOs for nonprofits, I spend a decent chunk of my time trying to find money. We were originally founded by a businessman who was our sole source funder. He was a former Fed employee who just cared about the quality of our government. We now get our money from individuals like his family. He passed away. We get money from foundations, from corporations. We do fee-for-service work for government as well. We work closely, as an example, on the survey with Deloitte. and they help us with talent and funding and other things as well. So it's a grab bag mix, and all of our information is available for the public if they're interested.
And that's ourpublicservice.org is the webpage of the Partnership for Public Service. Richard is up next from Reno, Nevada, on our line for Republicans. Richard, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're on the Washington Journal.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking my call. This is a very important subject. The amount of money and amount of time that people put in to run our country is immense. And I can tell you, I was in the private sector. I was an officer with one of the best Fortune 500 companies. And I have someone very close to me that works for the federal government in the Justice Department. And in fact, it's in the DEA. And I can tell you that from feedback I get, the trust and teamwork is awful. And I think it all starts with leadership. And when people go to work and come back demoralized at night and don't look forward to going to work because of this lack of trust and teamwork and developing employees, it's devastating. And as a taxpayer, it really disturbs me greatly. And I can say to the gentleman there that they take surveys. They do take surveys, and these surveys go nowhere. When employees feedback and they give feedback, they don't get any feedback from these surveys. Nothing changes. And I think that the leadership at the top should start conducting 360s on leadership all the way up and down the ladder and use that as a tool for evaluation, not...
Richard, thanks for the call. I want to give Max Steyer a chance to respond.
So you're 100% right. It's all about leadership, and you're 100% right that there are a number of places in the federal government, and the survey demonstrates that, the rankings demonstrate that aren't doing a very good job for their employees and, frankly, for the American public. The reason why we do these rankings is to try to make sure that the anecdote, the individual you know, is not just one anecdote out there, but we're able to collect the data and demonstrate from a data perspective where things are working and where they're not. So it sounds like for your friend, it's not. I will tell you that there are a number of agencies, and we heard from John about the Patent and Trademark Office being one of them, or NASA, or the intelligence community, more generally, where there's a lot of really good action, where agencies are doing a lot of things, listening to their employees and creating a culture where they recognize that if they empower those employees, the organization is going to do a lot better. So we hope that more leaders will pay attention to this, and we're driving as hard as we can to bang the drum as hard as we can so that the voice of the employee is actually heard.
Let's try to get a quick call in from Megan on our line for federal employees. Megan calling from Lincoln, Nebraska. Megan, good morning.
Good morning. I'll keep it brief. Thank you for having this line, though. I wish you had a federal employee line more often. One reason I think that there's this many disgruntled federal employees is that we have to work under legislation that we can't affect and we can't try to change, and that's because of the Hatch Act. And I know it's in place for protection, but I think that when you get outside of the D.C. area, the people making these decisions for us don't actually know how it affects us and what it actually is to work on the front line. And those of us who would like to change that can't because it's against the law.
Max Steyer.
So I think one issue you highlight that's critically important is that Congress is a big part of the problem. It's not just the leaders in the executive branch. Congress, the fighting that we've seen, the lack of budgets, the lack of long-term energy that's put into thinking about how we can do things over multiple years. All that, Congress is a big contributor to the dysfunctionality we're seeing in the executive branch. With respect to the Hatch Act, I think you're right. There are balancing equities that are at risk here. The effort is really to try to create a merit-based group of folks that aren't involved in the hurly-burly of the political process, so that there's some sense of protection for the employee and, frankly, for also the public. What I would hope would be that your insights, because you're right, the front line knows things better than anybody else, that your insights should be communicated and heard by the leaders in your organizations, and then that becomes a pipeline for Congress to hear more about what ought to change. That doesn't happen enough, but that's, again, what we're trying to drive towards.
Max Steyer is the President and CEO of Partnership for public service. The Best Places to Work survey can be found online at bestplacesToWork.org. Appreciate you coming in this morning to talk about it with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Are we in a quorum call?
We are.
I ask consent that it be withdrawn.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that if cloture is invoked on the executive calendar number 456, Alejandro Mayorkas to be Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, all but 1 hour post-cloture time be yielded back, and that when the Senate convenes on Friday, December 20th, the Senate resume consideration of the Mayorkas nomination with remaining hour of debate equally divided between Senators Carper and Coburn or their designees, and that following the use relating back at that time, the Senate proceed to vote on the Mayorkas nomination further, that the Senate then proceed to a cloture vote on the executive calendar number 459, John Koskikin of the Internal Revenue Service as under the regular order. And that if cloture is invoked, all post-cloture time be yielded back and the Senate proceed to vote on confirmation further. That the Senate then proceed to a cloture vote on executive calendar number 382, Brian Davis, be a federal district judge as under the regular order. And if cloture is invoked, all post-cloture time be yielded back and the Senate proceed to vote on confirmation. The motions to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action further, that the Senate then proceed to a cloture vote on executive calendar number 452, Janet Yellen, Federal Reserve Chair, as under the regular order. And if cloture is invoked on the Yellen nomination, all post-cloture time be yielded back, and the Senate proceed to vote on confirmation on Monday, January 6th, that time be determined by the Majority Leader in consultation with Republican leader. Further, that cloture on executive calendars number 455, 455, 371, 457, 356, and 189 be withdrawn. Further, following the cloture vote on the Mayorkas nomination, the Senate proceed to a period of morning business for debate only, with senators permitted to speak for 10 minutes each.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, from the information of the senators, there will be 2 roll call votes tonight at 11:15 p.m. on the motion to concur in the House message to accompany H.R. 3304, the National Defense Authorization Act, and cloture on the Mayorkas nomination, if cloture, and cloture on the Mayorkas nomination, period. If cloture is invoked, there will be a series of 6 roll call votes tomorrow, beginning at about 10 a.m. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to pre-morning business until 10 p.m. and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Is there objection? Without objection. Morning business is closed. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. On the floor, we see seated there Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and also Dick Durbin, who is the Senate Majority Whip. Leader Reid, just a few minutes ago, saying that the chamber is making some different plans than they had earlier. The chamber had planned to stay in session from tonight through Saturday to continue debate and votes on nominations, but those plans have changed. They're going ahead with a final vote on the Defense Programs Bill in about an hour, 10 minutes from now at 11:15 Eastern. And then after that, there'll be a vote to move forward with the nomination of Alejandro Mayorkas to be Deputy Secretary of the Homeland Security Department. And Leader Reid said the next votes, 6 roll call votes in all, will happen tomorrow morning at 10 Eastern. A little bit about the defense bill that's getting a vote shortly. The Washington Post writes that the measure would end the statute of limitations on cases for assault or rape, bar military commanders from overturning jury convictions in sexual assault and rape cases, and make it a crime to retaliate against people.
I ask that the unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection, so ordered.
And further ask unanimous consent that Commander Joe Carrigan, the Defense Legislative Fellow assigned to my office, be granted floor privileges for the remainder of the 113th Congress.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we all have various people in our government on occasion that help us do our work in our office, and being a member of the Armed Services Committee, we had the pleasure to have a number of fine defense fellows serve in my office and help us prepare the defense bill and deal with other issues of importance. And Commander Carrigan is just another one of the very fine fellows we've had. He's one of the best we've ever had, and he has a good strategic mind. He works extremely hard, and he's always thoughtful and a delight to have in the office. You know, one of the things when we talk about our military personnel, and we've been talking about their retirement benefits and that sort of thing, remember, unlike other government employees, they're on call anytime, any day, to be sent any place in the world at the very risk of their lives and physical well-being. In addition, they work long hours. They have no thought to object to being asked to work a weekend or night or 24 hours without sleep to do some task that they're called upon to do, and they get no overtime for it. And it's just the way things are done in the military, because when a challenge is out there, they act. And I know some point out the weaknesses in this major, large entity, the Defense Department, and some of the management and problems that arise, but I have to say, without any doubt whatsoever, that that institution has quality people, people of integrity, men and women who love their country and serve their country and do whatever you ask them to do. And I just see that every day when we work with people like Commander Carrigan, and he'll be successful in whatever he does, and whatever his next assignment will be. So as we wrap up this defense bill, I just wanted to thank him for his service, to thank all of our men and women in uniform who do their work, and hope that we in the Congress can be worthy of their trust. I thank the chair and would yield the floor.
couple of tweets sent out by Chad Pergram of Fox News. Contrary to the previous plan, the Senate will not stay in session tonight and all the way through Saturday evening. The other tweet, if goes according to plan, Friday is likely to be the last day of action in the Senate for the year. And some specifics on that: 2 votes are coming up in about an hour from now. A final passage of the Defense Programs Bill, and then a vote on advancing the nomination of Alejandro Mayorkas to be Deputy Homeland Security Secretary. And then Majority Leader Reid said that tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, the Senate will take up to 6 roll call votes. Those will be on final passage of the Mayorkas nomination, a procedural vote and final passage on the John Koskinen nomination to head the IRS, a procedural vote, and then a final passage vote on Brian Davis to be a district judge in Florida, and then a vote to advance Janet Yellen's nomination to lead the Federal Reserve. A final passage vote on Janet Yellen's nomination will not happen until the Senate returns from the holiday break, and we're expecting that to be on January 6th.
Mr. President.
A senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the call of the quorum be dispensed with.
The Senate's not in a quorum call.
Mr. President, saner heads have prevailed. I think the news that we just received about a much more reasonable way of moving forward rather than 2 more all-nighters with votes every 4 hours or so, it wasn't pleasing for anyone, particularly during the Christmas season. And it was totally unnecessary to do this. Had there not been some precipitating factors. And I didn't come down here to point fingers. There's frustration on both sides. Frustrations on the Democrat side with the Republicans, but I don't think it's been explained what caused Republicans to become so concerned and so frustrated and so, frankly, so angry over the way that the rules were broken to change the rules, and something that has been precious to this body for more than 200 years. And that is the uniqueness of the ability of a minority to have a say in legislation, to amend, or at least to offer amendments. They may succeed, they may not succeed. But to have a voice. And I think those who have not served here in the past and have never been in the minority can't begin to appreciate that right. Now, I started in the House of Representatives where majority rules. That's the way the founding fathers established that body. But they said they want the Senate to be different, the place where the passions could be cooled, where debate could be held, where amendments could be offered, where laws could be changed or modified. Members were given a 6-year term so that they wouldn't have the pressure of running for election in just months out or a year out. So they could step back and simply say, let's look at the longer view, the larger view. In my first time here in the Senate, that practice was led by Democrat leaders and Republican leaders. The majority changed. I came here with a Democrat leader who was eminently fair to the minority and insisted, as did many members, none more vividly and emotionally and committed than Robert Byrd, Democrat from West Virginia, who probably knew more about procedures and the history of the Senate than all the other senators combined. Read his volumes. And we would listen to Robert Byrd, respecting how he respected this institution. And so I experienced under Robert Byrd and then Republican Bob Dole and then Tom Daschle, Democrat, Trent Lott, Republican. I experienced respect for the rights of the minority, even though I was in the majority. They were sacrosanct. And no one really stood up and said, let's take those rights away. And those that did were shot down by their own party. Our party made an attempt at that. Sense and reason prevailed, and it was imposed by those who had been here, saying you need to understand the unique role of the Senate that's been created by our founding fathers, enshrined in the Constitution, 225 years of tradition and history. To have the majority leader, the senator from Nevada, come here and say, we're taking that away. What we had promised to do, that is, keep the rules, we're going to break them. And we're going to impose on you because you are dragging out the time it takes to secure nominations. We're going to impose on you, we're going to take away your minority rights, and we're going to rule by majority. As I said, I understand the frustration that must have been felt on the other side of the aisle when members would delay the confirmation of nominees. But where did that why were Republicans doing that? They were doing that because the majority leader was using a technique to deny us amendments on any number of bills. Everyone here has constituent interest, their own interests. They come to the Senate, they want to move forward with an agenda. When you're in the minority, you know that the chances of passing that are slim unless you get support from the other side. That's why we co-sponsor with Democrats when we want to try to move something, to see if they can convince their members to join us. That's the way this place has always worked. But under the process of the so-called filling of the tree, and I know people say, what in the world are you talking about, filling of the tree? And it's a procedural method which denies the minority the rights to offer an amendment. And I don't have the statistics in front of me, but the majority leader has imposed that time after time after time. And so the frustration just kept building here, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, of members who said, you know, I came to the United States Senate, I don't have a voice. I don't have an ability to even bring up my amendment. What are we afraid of? Taking a vote? If you can't take a vote and go home and explain your vote to people, then you shouldn't be here. You vote for what you believe in. You vote for what you think your state and your constituents that sent you here believe in. And some you win, some you lose. But at least you have the opportunity to make your case. And so for month after month and year after year, under the leadership of Senator Reid, increasingly, that right has been taken away. And the frustration that boils up from our feeling like, forget it. Forget 225 years of history. Forget how the Founding Fathers decided to structure this democratic function. Forget how past leaders, Republicans and Democrats, held this as sacrosanct, a right for the minority voice. Here's the party that says we got elected by a majority and therefore the minority has no say. Well, as I say, those who have not served in the minority really won't understand the denial of the right to express your views and have it put before this body for a vote. You can get up and talk about it, but you can't get it to a vote. So talk is cheap. Until they experience that, I'm afraid they won't have an understanding of how we need to get back to what this body was intended to be. So I just want my colleagues who have imposed this and supported the majority leader's tactics of denying members that ability to offer an amendment, regardless of what it what it's for. I want my colleagues to understand that's where the frustration came from. And that's why we try to use whatever rules we have left to try to send the message that you're stiffing us. You're denying us the very right that we work so hard to come to have here. And so I'm just making a plea, I guess. I'm making a plea that we sit down and have an adult conversation about how to make this place more efficient, how to make this more effective, but doing so in a way that the minority has a right to participate in the process. Going through this exercise that we've gone through here for the last few weeks, these votes every 2 hours and sleeping on cots in our office, on the couch, coming down here in the middle of the night to vote. If we're talking about something serious for the country that needs that kind of debate, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. If it's a defense bill or if it's a critical fiscal issue or foreign policy issue, that's what this place is all about. And if it takes us well into the night on something substantive like that, then we want to preserve that. But if it's over a nomination of a district court judge, and the statistics are that the majority party has virtually gotten every one that they wanted, until just recently when Republicans said somehow we got to send a message that we're being shut out. And we were shut out by a majority vote of the Democrat Party, which basically told Republicans, forget the history, forget the past, sit down, you have no role. I hope we can get back to that. I hope we can get back to that because it is so important for the future of this country to have a deliberative body that has the time and has the opportunity to debate, to offer amendments, to fashion legislation in a bipartisan fashion. Maybe we've learned that lesson. Maybe we haven't. There's a lot of rancor here right now. I'm glad we came to this agreement that 11:15 this evening we will have 2 votes, and then we've moved the process to 6 votes tomorrow morning, and then we'll be able to go home and enjoy Christmas with our families. But I think the solution to this is not to throw daggers at each other, but to sit down and think through. Maybe reach back. Maybe reach back to some of the writings of Robert Byrd. Maybe reach back to some of the stirring words that were spoken by the majority telling their own members, don't go there. You are taking away the very essence of the United States Senate. One of the members on the Democrat side made that, who has many, many years here, more experience than I, made that plea. Unfortunately, it wasn't listened to by members on in his caucus. But I think if we could step back and we could look at the history of those in the majority doing everything they could to protect the rights of those in the minority, we would recognize that there is a better way to go forward than what we've done here. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, a piece of parliamentary business, may I ask? Unanimous consent that a military fellow with Senator Murray's office, Major James O'Brien, be granted floor privileges for today's session of the Senate.
Without objection.
Thank you. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte. Ms. Baldwin.
The Senator from Delaware.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the initiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I come to the floor once again to talk about jobs, about manufacturing jobs. This week, under Senator Amy Klobuchar's leadership, the Joint Economic Committee released a report that lays out thoroughly and thoughtfully why manufacturing jobs has such promise and how Congress can act to help spur manufacturing job creation now and into the future. The report shows that today manufacturing jobs are high-quality jobs, that they pay better than jobs in any other sector in wages and benefits, that they help create more local service sector jobs, that they contribute more to the local economy, and that manufacturers invest the most in private R&D of any sector in our country. Manufacturing, as you well know, Mr. President, has long played an important role in our nation's economy. It has spurred the post-war economic boom and served as our economic backbone that built the American middle class. But over the past 60 years, manufacturing in our country has changed gradually and then dramatically. As our economy and the world have changed, so has the nature of manufacturing and the playing field on which we can and must compete. Due to global competition and the worst recession since the Great Depression, we lost 6 million manufacturing jobs in the United States in the first decade of this century. We're now on our way back, but we're well short of where we were in 2000. We have gained 550,000 manufacturing jobs over the last 3 years, and that gives me real hope. And in just the last 6 months, we've seen new signals that our manufacturing sector continues to be on the rebound. A new report from the Institute for Supply Management shows the U.S. manufacturing sector grew last month at the fastest pace in 2.5 years, and hiring has reached an 18-month high. The value of our manufacturing exports has grown 38% in the last 4 years, and those exports now account for nearly 3 million jobs on American shores. But, Mr. President, as you and I well know, as many of our colleagues know, we need to invest more in that success. We need to invest more in that growth in the private sector and the public sector. Overall, this is great news about the slow but real but steady recovery of our manufacturing sector. The reason we're coming back is the United States is actually poised to compete in advanced manufacturing in the manufacturing economy of this century. In the 21st century, manufacturing is fundamentally different than it was in our past. Rather than repeating the same simple tasks over and over again, workers must now carry out far more complex and varying tasks. They need to be critical thinkers and problem solvers. They have to do math and communicate with each other in writing and as a team and work in ways simply not expected 20 or 30 years ago. Crucially, they need to understand the entire manufacturing process in a way that wasn't necessary before. Yes, there are machines doing a lot of work, but we need workers who can oversee them and understand them to keep our steady, growing benefits to increased productivity. Manufacturers can't rely on someone from outside our country to fix a problem every time there is one. Today, they rely on their workers to troubleshoot on the fly. Our workers need to continue to be some of the most productive in the world, and to do that, they need to be more skilled than ever, particularly because they are overseeing highly complex operations. The manufacturing floor of today, as this report reminds us, is no longer the dirty, dingy, dangerous manufacturing workplace of 50 or 100 years ago. Today it's clean, it's high-tech, it's highly productive, and it needs a highly skilled workforce. We can win by training our workers for these jobs. While some nations engage in a race to the bottom on environmental, labor, and wage standards, this isn't the playing field that we can or should try to win on. Fortunately, we already have the tools to lead the way in manufacturing in an innovation-centered economy. This Joint Economic Committee report outlines how low energy costs due to greatly expanded natural gas supplies, a highly skilled workforce relative to much of the rest of the world, and having still the world's best universities, all in combination give us a real fighting chance. American manufacturing, I am convinced, is poised for a takeoff. And now we have this report from the Joint Economic Committee which shows us just that. It shows why we should remain optimistic about American manufacturing if we can simply, in this body, harness the will to act. This report, well, frankly, it lays out a lot of why we've created Manufacturing Jobs for America. Manufacturing Jobs for America is a campaign to build support for the good manufacturing legislation that Democrats and Republicans can agree on. So far, 26 Democratic senators have come together to contribute 44 bills to a conversation. 31 of those bills have already been introduced in this body, and almost half of them have bipartisan co-sponsors. We are actively seeking Republican co-sponsors on the rest. Our goal overall is to generate more and work more closely with Republicans to build consensus for bills that can pass the Senate, pass the House, and go to the White House to become law. We want to see manufacturing bills that can really help put Americans back to work. And I'm grateful for the leadership of Senator Debbie Stabenow, who, along with her co-chair, Senator Lindsey Graham, lead the bipartisan manufacturing caucus that is helping to take the great ideas and bills generated through this initiative and turn them into solid bipartisan bills. This Joint Economic Committee report emphasizes that there's 4 key areas where we have to focus to create manufacturing jobs now and in the future, and they're exactly the areas that the Manufacturing Jobs for America initiative centers on as well. First, we have to strengthen America's workforce. Second, we have to fight for a more level global playing field so we can open up markets abroad and compete successfully. Third, we need to make it easier for manufacturers, especially new and small businesses, to access capital, to invest in research and development, as well as new equipment and products. And fourth, we can and should do more to ensure a coordinated all-of-government effort in supporting manufacturing by insisting on a stronger, clearer national manufacturing strategy. Together across these 4 areas, the bills in Manufacturing Jobs for America can have a real and substantial impact if they become law. I believe in the power of this initiative because I've seen the potential of manufacturing up close. In my time in the private sector, I developed a fierce belief in how we can and must act here in Washington to support and spur American private sector manufacturing. Before I came here, much of my work in the private sector was at a manufacturing company, a materials-based science company that makes hundreds of products. And at one point, I was part of a site location team that had to decide where to locate a new state-of-the-art semiconductor chip packaging manufacturing plant. What made the difference? In the ultimate decision, it was, first and foremost, we needed skilled and reliable workers. Second, we wanted the state and county and city governments to be responsive and have made investments in infrastructure. And while we also, of course, considered tax credits and training grants, the first 2 really were the main factors: the skills and capabilities of the workforce at all levels and the responsiveness of the local government, the state government, and the federal government in investing in infrastructure. This experience taught me 2 things. The advanced manufacturing sector can thrive in the United States. That facility was located in America, not overseas, and there is a critical role for government to play. So if this Congress makes a concerted across-the-board push to help create manufacturing jobs in America, I'm convinced we can lay a strong foundation for growth today and tomorrow. The opportunity is there, just in front of us. We just need to stop the endless bipartisan struggles that have dominated this Congress in the last few years and seize the very real, very positive opportunity in front of us to lay out a bipartisan path forward to strengthen the manufacturing sector in our country. Together, we can keep our factories humming and lead the way in new industries of the future. We just need the political will to try. And that's what this effort, Manufacturing Jobs for America, is all about. I am so grateful to Senator Klobuchar and the Joint Economic Committee for the Manufacturing Jobs for the Future report and for the vision it lays out. And I appreciate the effort of all of my colleagues who've contributed great and strong and clear ideas to this Manufacturing Jobs for America initiative. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.